We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Makkos. This is Makkos Daf 3a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brisa in which Rabbi Akiva said that Eidim Zomin, they do not pay by admission. And the idea is that when it comes to Eidim Zomin, the punishment that they're getting is what they tried to give to the defendant, but they weren't actually successful. And so therefore, the punishment they are receiving essentially is a knas. It's a fine. What they tried to do, that's what they receive. And by a knas, the halach is you don't pay al pi atzma, you don't pay through admission, and that's why Eidim Zomin, they are not punished through admission. And on the previous summit, Rav Nachman gave a reason, and the Gemara now continues and elaborates on that. What exactly is Rav Nachman saying? Rav Nachman essentially is saying that they didn't actually do anything. It's what they tried to do to the defendant, but they didn't actually succeed. But Hainu de Rabba, that's exactly the same thing that Rabba said on the previous summit. The point of the Gemara here is, why are Rav Nachman and Rabba giving the exact same reason that Eidim Zomin don't pay al pi atzman, that it's a knas? And the Gemara answers to that. Rather, what we should say is V'chein Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says a similar approach to what Rabbah says. And Rashi explains, "My niu hai mamon biyad bailav to come Rav Nachman." When Rav Nachman said the money is still in the hands of the owner, because again they tried to do that to the defendant, but they were not successful. Hainu de lo nasa ma'isa. That means that what they did was not successful. Shadayin lo shilem. That meaning he didn't yet pay. Ela shenigmar dino l'shalim. It just means there was a verdict. But that again, that's the same exact thing that Rabbah said. And so the Gemara answered it should be v'chein amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says the same thing as Rabbah. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says Eid Zomem Mishalim Lefi Chelko, and Eid Zomem he pays according to his portion. And the Gemara says My Mishalim Lefi Chelko. What does it mean that he pays according to his portion? Ilaima Dehai Mishalim Palga V'Hai Mishalim Palga. If you're going to say what it means is this one pays half and this one pays half, meaning to say, let's say they tried to make the defendant pay, for example, $100. Now they're each going to pay $50. So Tanina, but that we already learned in a Mishnah. That's a Mishnah later on. It says Mishalshin b'mamon. We divide when it comes to money, meaning again they split up the payments by Eidim Zomin. Ve'in Mishalshin b'malchus, and we don't do that same division when it comes to malchus. You don't say this one gets half of the lashes and the other one gets half of the lashes. But again, by mamon you do say that we divide it among the Eidim Zomin. And so the Gemara says if that was already taught, that can't be what Rav is saying. So Ella rather the Gemara says Kagon de itzom chad minayu. Maybe what Rav means is you have a situation where you have two witnesses and only one of them is falsified. The Mishalim Palga Didei, that he's going to pay his half. Maybe that's what Rav was saying. But the Gemara says, is that really true? Mi Mishalim, does he really pay his half? Vatanya, but we learned in a brisa, Ein Eid Zomim Mishalim Maman Adisha Yizomu Shneim, and Eid Zomim does not pay money unless both of them are falsified. It's not enough if just one of them is falsified. And so the Gemara continues with another approach. Amar Rava says, what did Rav mean to say? He meant to say, Ba'omer Eidos Sheker Hi Adati. So let's say he says, he admits that he testified falsely, and that's a situation where he's going to pay his portion. But the Gemara says, Kol Kamine, but is he even believed to do that? He's not able to go back on his testimony. There's actually a rule, Kevan Shehigid, once he tells his testimony, Shovei Nechozer Magid, he can't go tell a different testimony, so that can't be the case either. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella rather, B'omer Heyadnu V'uzamnu B'bezin Ploni. This witness, what he says is that we testified and we were both falsified in that particular court, and now he's admitting to that, and therefore he's saying that he's going to be chayiv. But come on, but who's that follow? Delok Rabbi Akiva. That would not seem like Rabbi Akiva. Deik Rabbi Akiva, because if we were following Rabbi Akiva, Hamar Af Eno Mishalim Al Piatzmo. Again, Rabbi Akiva said by Eidim Zomin, they don't pay by admission, so it can't be a case of admission. And so instead the Gemara says, Ella rather, what's Rav talking about? He's talking about the following. Ba'omer Heyadnu V'huzamnu B'bezin Ploni, that he says as follows: we testified and we were falsified in such and such a court. V'chivunu mamon, and they also said that we're chayiv mamon. In other words, it's not that he's admitting and that's what's making him chayiv. The other court actually already said that we are liable, and so then he has to pay his portion. One might have thought, since he's not able by saying this, he can't make the other witness have to pay. So so maybe he also will not have to pay. Kamash Malon, that's what Rav is teaching us, that he does pay his portion. And Rashi explains, V'chiyavnu mamon, again, the other court already said that we were liable, bebezin sheuzamnu, v'midonu hanidon b'din al hazamasnu. Again, in the court that we were falsified, and we were actually, the defendant, he stood us up for trial about the fact that we were falsified. V'chayvunu bebezin, and we were chayiv already to pay in court. At that point in time, it's already mamon at that point. It's already something they're really liable for. It's not like he's making himself himself guilty. It's not a situation of being guilty through admission. Shekvar here shiyu Elohim, because he was already made guilty by the court. And the Gemara said one might have thought, since he can't be mechayev the other witness, sheinu neman al chaveru, he's not believed to say this about his friend, maybe he also is not chayev, and that's what Rav is teaching us. He does have to pay his portion. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Me'idin anu es ish ploni shegiresh es ishto. Let's say two witnesses come in and they testify about a certain person that he divorced his wife, velo nasan la ksubasa, but he hasn't yet paid the ksuba. In other words, what they're really testifying to is the fact that he owes her the ksuba. And it turns out that really they're false witnesses, so now they have to pay what they tried to be mechayev. Now the simple understanding would be that they're trying to be mechayev him to pay the ksuba, so they should have to pay that value, but that's not really true, as the Mishnah now says, because it could be between today and tomorrow. Sofo litein la ksubasa, maybe in the end he is going to have to pay that ksuba. In other words, they're trying to be mechayev him to pay the ksuba right now, and they're false witnesses. But maybe in the future, sometime in the future, he really will pay that ksuba. So we have to make an estimation. What are they really making him pay if he might pay in the future? It's really the value of that money in the interim, and that's what the Mishnah says. Omdin, we have to do an evaluation. Kama adam rotza litein b'ksubasa shalzu. How much would a person want to pay for this ksuba? She'im nisalmana o nisgarsha, that if she should become widowed or divorced, v'im mesa, and if she dies, yirashena bala, then her husband actually will take it. In other words, a person, let's say he wants to buy the rights to a woman's ksuba, he's really buying it on chance. It's not necessarily true that she will receive that ksuba. He's putting down a certain amount of money on the chance that in the future maybe she'll be divorced, maybe she'll be widowed and she'll receive the ksuba, but that might not happen. It's possible that she's going to die and the husband will actually keep that ksuba. He'll never have to pay that ksuba. And so therefore we have to estimate what is that value, what would a person pay, and we take that value, as the Gemara will explain in a moment, we take that value in order to figure out exactly what the witnesses are chayev to pay. And the Gemara says, Ketzad Shaman, how exactly do we do this evaluation to figure out what the witnesses have to pay? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda says, Bebal, we figure it out with the husband's side. Now the idea over here is as follows. The husband, right now, there's a piece of land that's designated to pay the wife's ksuba should he divorce his wife or should he die. But right now the husband is actually allowed to use this land and he's allowed to get the fruits from this land. So he has a certain amount of use of this land at the present moment. And essentially, that's his zechus of the ksuba. That's what we mean Bebal. And that's what the witnesses were trying to take away from the husband. The witnesses were trying to make the husband pay right now, and again, he might pay in the future. It's possible he would have paid that ksuba sometime in the future, but right now he has possession of the property, he gets the payros of the property, and so that is worth a certain amount. If a person would go over to the husband and buy those rights from the husband, they would pay a certain amount on the chance that maybe that it would end up that the husband would have to pay the ksuba to the wife, and they would lose that. So that's the schus really that the witnesses were trying to take away from the husband, and we do that evaluation, and that is what they owe. Rav Nosson Bar Oshia says, Be'isha, we evaluate what the woman's zechus. Maybe someone would pay the wife on the chance that she would receive the ksuba. Now that's a much lesser amount. That's much less in terms of the amount of money. And Rashi is going to explain that that's the amount actually that the witnesses do not pay because they're trying to testify against the husband. So what we do is we take the full value of the ksuba and we subtract the value that the woman has in the ksuba from that value, and that's what the witnesses have to pay. And Amar Papa says, Be'isha uvechsuba, so we evaluate the woman's side and her ksuba. Rashi will explain what that means. And Rashi explains, Rav Chisda Amar Bebal. Rav Chisda says, we take the husband's zechus. Zechus sveiko shalbal. That's the merit that the husband has. But again, everything is on a doubt, because he might have to pay that ksuba. Omden kama adam rotzalita in bo v'oso. You know, as we say, how much would a person pay the husband for the zechus that he has in the ksuba? And that's what the witnesses were trying to take away. That's what they pay. Rav Nosson Amar Be'isha, Rav Nosson says we take the woman's zechus. Zechus sveika, meaning her doubt that maybe she's going to get the ksuba. Then that's what we evaluate. What would someone pay on the chance to get her ksuba? V'yoso lo yishlamu. Rashi explains that's the part that they actually don't pay. V'chol hashar yishlamu, they pay everything else. V'chomer gadol hu etzlan, that's much more strict because that's a small amount of zechus that she has. We subtract that from the total. That would mean that the witnesses are paying much more. And Rashi continues, Amar Papa says, Be'isha shaman, we do evaluate through the woman, Kirav Nasan, exactly like Rav Nasan, meaning we subtract that amount from the total. Uvichsubasa lo yishlamu lo elaha oda bichsubasa al hadamim halalu. We take the ksuba and you only pay again based on subtracting that amount of zechus that she has. They pay the rest, and that's all that they pay. And the point over here is, avalon nichse melug shala. They do not pay her nichse melug. The idea over here is, because when they testify that there was a divorce, divorce, it's not only affecting the ksuba, it also affects the nichsei milug. They were making the husband lose nichsei milug also. Nichsei milug is property that the woman brings into the marriage that the husband is allowed to use while they're married, and if there's a divorce, he has to give that property back. So be'edusin, with their testimony, they were also making him lose that. Milechol peiros bechayeh, he's no longer able to eat the fruits in her lifetime. Umiliresh osav mosa, and also to inherit from her if she dies. Ein mishalman, the point of Rapapa is they don't have to pay that, even though they were with their testimony making him lose those nichsei milug. T'yachol and lomar, because we could say t'yachol lomar anu lo hayadnu ella al ksubasa, because they can say we were only testifying on the ksuba. That was our main testimony that he owes that ksuba. V'lo yadanu shayu lo nichsei milug. We had no idea that he has nichsei milug. We weren't testifying on that, and therefore the kasher zaman punishment does not apply to the nichsei milug. That is Rav Papa's point. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Mi'idin anu bi'ishploni, let's say again, witnesses testify against a certain person, Shuchayv l'chaveru elef zuz, that he's chayv to pay 1,000 zuz to his friend, al menas litno lo mikan v'yat shloshim yom, meaning to say he owes 1,000 zuz, and he owes it within 30 days. V'hu omer, now he says, the defendant says, mikan v'yat eser shanim, that's not true. I don't have 30 days to pay, it's actually 10 years that I have to pay off this loan. And so the Mishnah says, omdim, again, we have to do an evaluation. Kama adam rotza litan, how much would a person want to pay? V'yu biyado elef zuz, that he can now keep 1,000 zuz, beinosan mikan v'yad lamed yom, instead of having to pay it in 30 days, beinosan mikan v'yad eser shanim, that now he has 10 years. How much is that worth to hold on to that money for that longer period of time? That's really what these Eidim Zomin were assuming they were proven to be false witnesses. That's really what they were making him pay. He was going to have to pay the 1,000 zuz anyway, but he would have had to pay it much later. We have to evaluate what is that worth. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Hamalva es chaveiro le'eser shanim, if somebody lends money to his friend for 10 years, shvius mishamtasa, what actually happens is the Shemitah year will occur within the time frame of that loan. Shemitah is every 7 years, this is a 10-year loan, and therefore Rav Yehuda says from Shmuel that shvius actually will cancel that loan, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amud Beis.